Hello and welcome to What's the Summary? The rest is politics leading. Episode 57, 53 minutes in duration, starring Tucker Eskew, interviewed by Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. Subjects discussed: Trump today, Hillary in 2016, how Biden can win, Iraq and Afghanistan, and the future. The podcast began with a guest introduction and where we are today. Tucker Eskew is a career politician and lifelong Republican that worked alongside Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. He also worked alongside Alistair following the 9/11 attack. Not a fan of Trump, but Eskew didn't vote for Hillary either in 2016 and for the first time voted for a Democrat in 2020. He says only an act of God could stop Trump becoming the Republican nominee at this stage. Alistair asks how America got to this position with Trump. Eskew says Trump's shamelessness is his superpower, combined with his huge charisma and the voters being unhappy, leads them to defend the undefensible. Hillary 2016. Eskew says he didn't vote for Hillary in 2016 and she gave no reason to get his vote. He thought she had poor candidate skills, the country was suffering from Clinton fatigue, Obama didn't support her and she didn't have a plan. Maybe she could have won until the story leaked about a private email server right at the last minute. How can Biden win? Alistair asks how Biden should fight Trump. Eskew says he needs to convey strength and a steady as she goes type message. He advises that he needs to use produced television appearances and avoid debates while just hoping Trump becomes unstable, but that's not likely. Rory asks why Biden is running again. Eskew says Biden is convinced of his own abilities to do the big job. The Bidens believe they were the only ones that could have beaten Trump in 2020, and it is the same for 2024. He goes on to say the Democrats could have picked a superb alternative from a stable of candidates, but it was deemed too risky by the party. Rory goes on to ask why Biden won't replace Harris as his VP. Eskew's opinion is that the move would lead to awful protests and be too controversial. Alistair changes tack and asks what would Reagan make of Trump today. Eskew says he would be sickened by Trump, who picks at every norm and pillar of society. Reagan read the Constitution and embodied it, while it's completely alien to Trump, yet he wields it against others. They briefly discussed Sarah Palin as another populist, and Eskew says the difference is that Trump has a vast amount more confidence than her. Iraq and Afghanistan. Alistair asks Eskew for his insight on George W. Bush. This was historically the time that Alistair and Eskew worked together when Eskew was sent to the UK by the White House. Eskew says Bush is a man of conviction. There was no playbook for 9/11. He gave his all for 8 years. His sense of the UK at the time was that it was remarkably international, and he liked that it was newspaper-centric, being from newspaper stock himself. Documents were treated with respect and were read and shredded, not like in the Trump era. Eskew is asked why religious groups are backing Trump. He explains it's about grievance and a feeling that the politicians are your betters looking down on you. Trump is the answer to this grievance. Eskew is asked his position on Iraq. Bearing in mind Eskew was to Bush that Campbell was to Blair, he says the actions taken were the best of intentions. Again, there was no playbook. He says that they didn't lie. There was intention and effect, and some take the effect to be a lie, but they never lied. However, mistakes were made. Rory raises the issue of Afghanistan, with which he has personal experience, and asks Eskew to account for the $3.5 trillion spent to invade and then hand back to the Taliban. Eskew says Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was wrong. He goes on to say, you just do the best you can, even if it's like emptying the ocean with teaspoons. Mistakes lead to enormous expenditure of treasure and loss of lives. This is bound to be destabilizing and we need to get back on solid ground. Rory then asks if the US has the appetite to be the global cop, as has been the case since the Second World War. Eskew's answer is that today, innovation and diversity is their strength. They need better leaders and a grassroots movement to demand this comes to pass. Alistair asks how Britain is seen in the world today. Eskew says it's more muted, unfortunately, following Brexit, plus a reduction in economic strength. The future. Rory asks why Trump is supported by senior Republicans who bend the knee to him, like Tim Scott. Eskew says the Republicans could have ended Trump with the second impeachment. He paints Republicans as cowards and says they fear the voters who keep them in office. The debrief. Rory says he learns a lot. He feels empathy for him, breaking with a leader like he did with Boris Johnson. Alistair was taken with the Bidens' unbelievable confidence that they are the right people. He thinks Eskew is not a leader like Hillary, Bernie Sanders or Schwarzenegger, but good to get voices like this on his pod. Rory liked his sermons on hope, but he wished he'd pressed him more on why the religious groups are so attracted to Trump. Alistair says he has changed the way he talks since he knew him. In the past, it was about winning the argument as a realist, but now you need to think around it, instead of being tribal, whilst also being loyal, as he still is to Bush. Rory finishes saying it's good to see him taking the fight to Trump, and that was the end of the podcast.